Ambassador Thaddeus Voss strode into the cavernous chamber with deliberate slowness, the subtle click of his dress shoes echoing against stone walls that predated human civilization. The massive hall on Proxima Station had been deliberately chosen by the Kralaxian Empire for its psychological impact, a reminder of their 5,000-year dominance across 17 star systems. 27 Kralaxian dignitaries watched from their elevated perches, their quadruple-jointed limbs folded. In formal posture, iridescent scales reflecting the chamber's artificial sunlight. Each wore the ceremonial armor of their respective planetary houses, adorned with trophies from conquered worlds. Admiral Krell Mathar, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet, leaned forward slightly, the only one who dared break protocol to "Better observe the lone human. You arrive without guards, Ambassador Voss," Krell Mathar's translator device conveyed in flat tones. Again. Voss smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "I've never needed them, Admiral." The gathered Kralaxians shifted uncomfortably. Though they towered over Voss by at least 2 feet and possessed natural armor that could deflect small arms fire, something about the human's calm demeanor disturbed them on a primal level. "The Terran Confederation sends only you to negotiate. In terms of surrender?" The Emperor's voice, Dravulik asked with practiced disdain. "The Confederation sent me to negotiate terms of peace," Voss corrected gently. "There's an important distinction." Nervous clicking sounds, Kralaxian whispers, rippled through the assembly. The human shouldn't be so composed. The Battle of Rigel had decimated the Terran fleet just weeks earlier. The human colonies on Epsilon Eridani had fallen. By all accounts, humanity was cornered. "Your species' defiance defies logic," Dravulik continued. "Your military forces are outmatched. Your technological capabilities are inferior. Your territories are surrounded. What possible leverage could you believe you possess?" Voss removed a small device from his pocket, no larger than an ancient pocket watch. The Kralaxian guards immediately raised their weapons, energy fields humming to life around the chamber. "At ease," Voss said calmly. "This is merely a holographic projector." With a small click, the device activated, displaying a 3-dimensional star chart of Kralaxian territory. Then, one by one, red dots began to appear at strategic locations, manufacturing hubs, military installations, transport nodes. "What is the meaning of this?" Admiral Krell Mathar demanded. "These red markers represent human agents currently embedded throughout your territory," Voss explained. "Specifically, they're what we call Omega operatives." The term hung in the air, like a death sentence. The Kralaxians had heard rumors of these mythical human operatives, solitary infiltrators with near-supernatural capabilities. Most believed them to be propaganda. "Impossible," hissed a senior general. "Our genetic scanners would detect human biosignatures." "Yet here I stand, having walked through 7 security checkpoints to reach this chamber," Voss replied. "And I assure you, compared to our Omega operatives, I'm positively conspicuous." Emperor Vraxtur himself broke his ceremonial silence, a shocking breach of Imperial protocol. "You expect us to believe humans have infiltrated the heart of our empire?" Voss's expression remained unchanged. "I expect you to verify it. Check your most secure facility on Kralax Prime, the quantum research laboratory in the Northern Hemisphere. You'll find that Dr. Mekloven, your chief weapons scientist, died 3 years ago. The person wearing his skin has been one of ours ever since." The silence that followed was absolute. A junior aide whispered urgently into the Emperor's ear, confirming something on a secured channel. The massive ruler's scales darkened, the Kralaxian equivalent of turning pale. "This changes nothing," Admiral Krell Mathar declared, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your confederation still cannot stand against our armada." "Perhaps," Voss acknowledged, "but can your empire survive what would happen if all these operatives acted simultaneously?" "Before you answer, consider that they've been in place for years. integrating into your society, learning your weaknesses. He paused, gaining access to your bioweapons. The chamber erupted in hisses and clicks as the Kralaxian leadership conferred. Frantically, Voss waited patiently. The truce negotiations hadn't even begun, and already the mighty Kralaxian Empire trembled before a single, unarmed human. 3 cycles had passed since the initial meeting, and the Kralaxian delegation had swelled, from 27 to 43 members. They had insisted on more security, more advisors, more observers, as if sheer numbers could diminish the threat Ambassador Voss represented. The human sat alone at the massive negotiation table in the Imperial Palace on Kralax Prime. An unprecedented concession that no non-Kralaxian had ever been permitted within these hallowed walls. Voss appeared utterly at ease, reviewing documents on a simple datapad while ignoring the battalion of elite guards positioned throughout the chamber. "Your demands are unreasonable," Grand Strategist Prelvazor declared, slamming a clawed fist on the polished table. "The cession of the Orion Corridor would cut our empire in half. A demilitarized zone benefits both parties," Voss replied without looking up. "It provides a buffer that prevents future conflicts. It provides your confederation with time to rebuild," countered Admiral Krelmatha. "Time we should not grant you." Voss finally raised his eyes, fixing the Admiral with a stare that made the decorated war veteran flinch visibly. "You've verified my claims about our operatives?" "Some," admitted Dravulik reluctantly. "Enough to negotiate." Voss nodded. "Then you understand that time benefits us both, unless you prefer immediate action?" The threat hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. The Kralaxians had indeed discovered 3 human operatives embedded in critical positions, one in their defense ministry, another commanding a battlecruiser, and most alarmingly, one serving as a nursery attendant for Imperial hatchlings. They had been executed immediately, but the damage to Kralaxian morale was incalculable. If humans could infiltrate even the Imperial nursery, nowhere was safe. "You cannot expect us to simply surrender territories we've held for millennia," Emperor Raxtur said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "I expect you to consider the cost of continuing this war," Voss replied evenly. "Your empire has conquered 17 systems over 5,000 years. Impressive. Humanity expanded to 23 systems in less than 4 centuries. What does that tell you about our capacity for growth or destruction?" A historian in ceremonial robes stepped forward. "You speak of the human tendency toward rapid expansion, yet overlook your fundamental weakness. Your species lacks unity. The Terran Confederation is barely holding together. 3 of your colony worlds have already sued for separate peace." For the first time, Voss smiled genuinely. "Magistrate Locke's viewer, I admire your research, but you've misunderstood something crucial about humanity." He stood, moving to a wall display showing the known galaxy. With a gesture, he highlighted human territories in blue. "These colonies, you believe, are fragmenting from the Confederation? This perceived disunity? It's by design." He turned to face the assembled Kralaxians. "In your 5,000-year history, how many rebellions has your empire faced? How many internal conflicts threatened your rule?" The historian shifted uncomfortably. 63 major insurrections," he admitted. "Humans accept conflict as inevitable," Voss continued. "We build it into our systems. We argue, we fight, we disagree, but against external threats, we unite with a ferocity your kind cannot comprehend." He tapped the display, bringing up historical footage of Earth's pre-space conflicts. The assembled aliens watched in horror as humans fought across various terrains, desert warfare, urban combat, jungle skirmishes, displaying a versatility and ruthlessness that made even hardened Kralaxian warriors uneasy. "Your species is violent," whispered an elderly counselor. No more than yours, Voss countered, but we've refined violence to an art form. We've spent more of our history fighting ourselves than living in peace, and now, he gestured to the Galaxian representatives, you've given us something we've rarely had, a common enemy. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galaxians had awakened something ancient and terrible in humanity, the unified purpose that had always been its most devastating weapon. The terms remain on the table, Voss said quietly. The Orion corridor becomes neutral territory. Inspection. Teams from both sides ensure compliance. Trade resumes under regulated conditions. He paused. Or we can see how many more of your worlds have humans walking among you, waiting for a single command. The third meeting took place aboard the Galaxian. Dreadnought Immortal Conquest, a show of military might meant to regain psychological advantage. The Emperor's War Council had determined that surrounding Ambassador Voss with the Empire's most fearsome warship would remind him of the overwhelming force they could bring to bear. They were wrong. Voss walked the length of the massive bridge, nodding appreciatively at the advanced technology on display. Far from being intimidated, he seemed to be taking mental notes, occasionally pausing to examine particular systems with professional interest. Your engine efficiency has improved, he remarked to Fleet Engineer Nax Vueler. The containment field harmonics are more stable than in your previous designs. The engineer's scales fluttered in alarm. These were classified improvements, implemented only months ago. How could the human know? Admiral Krell Mathar interrupted before the conversation could continue. The Emperor grows impatient with these negotiations, Ambassador. Your Confederation continues to make unreasonable demands while sheltering behind vague threats. Voss turned, raising an eyebrow. Have my threats seemed vague? I apologize for the lack of clarity. He gestured to a nearby console. May I? After receiving a reluctant nod from the Admiral, Voss approached the terminal and entered a complex sequence. The bridge's main display flickered, showing security footage from within the very ship they stood on. The timestamp indicated it was live. How did you access internal security? Demanded the security chief, rushing to the console. I didn't, Voss replied. Ghost Protocol did. On the screen, various areas of the ship appeared. Crew quarters, weapons bays, even the supposedly secure engine room. In each location, a subtle anomaly became apparent. Crew members whose movements seemed just slightly off, whose uniforms didn't sit quite right, whose eyes held a distinctly human calculation. The average Galaxian can identify 7,000 distinct scale patterns from birth, Voss explained conversationally. It's an evolutionary adaptation from your species' tribal past, but you rely on this natural ability so much that your technological security is surprisingly minimal. Perfect grounds for Ghost Protocol. What is this Ghost Protocol? The Emperor demanded, his massive form trembling with barely controlled rage. An infiltration program developed after our first encounters with your kind, Voss explained. We realized early on that we couldn't match your military strength ship for ship, so we adapted. He gestured to the screen where a seemingly normal Galaxian engineer was adjusting critical systems. That's Lieutenant Commander Rivali. She's been aboard this vessel for 6 months. The real engineering officer she replaced has been in cryostasis, in a facility on Europa. The bridge erupted into chaos as security teams scrambled to verify his claims. Orders were shouted, weapons drawn. Through it all, Voss remained perfectly calm, even when 3 guards trained their weapons directly on him. I wouldn't, he said softly. The operatives have contingency protocols if I don't return unharmed. You would destroy this ship with yourself aboard? Krellmather asked incredulously. Voss shook his head. Nothing so dramatic, but your navigation systems would certainly suffer catastrophic failure. At your current velocity and heading, that would send you directly into the gravity well of the gas giant you're orbiting. A frantic officer approached the Admiral, confirming that security teams had indeed apprehended 3 crew members with unexplainable anomalies in their biometrics. The impersonations were so perfect that they had served effectively for months. Without detection, this is an act of war, the Emperor declared. No, Voss corrected, this is war, has been from the moment your fleets crossed into Terran space. The difference is, we've been fighting it our way. He turned to face the enraged ruler directly. Your ships can bombard our colonies from orbit. Your armies can occupy our worlds. But you will never sleep soundly again, knowing that the person serving your meals might be human, that your most trusted advisor might be human, that your ship might be piloted by human hands wearing Kralaxian skin. The psychological impact of his words was devastating. Across the bridge, Kralaxian officers instinctively moved away from colleagues they'd served with for years, sudden suspicion clouding their thoughts. The terms of our proposed treaty include mutual withdrawal of all covert operatives, Voss added quietly. Think carefully about your response. The 4th meeting convened in neutral territory, an ancient space station constructed by a long-vanished species in the sparse region between Kralaxian and human space. The station's massive stone architecture predated both civilizations, its enigmatic builders having disappeared millennia ago, leaving behind only their imposing structures as testament to their existence. The Kralaxian delegation had changed. Gone were many of the military hardliners, replaced by intelligence specialists and diplomatic corps veterans. They had learned that facing Voss with threats of force only revealed new dimensions of human infiltration capabilities. We have reviewed your treaty proposals, began Torvzanil, the newly appointed chief negotiator. His scales were dark grey with age, marking him as one of the Empire's most experienced diplomats. There are aspects we can accept, and others that require modification. Voss nodded, seemingly pleased with the more professional approach. Progress at last. The negotiations proceeded for several hours, covering trade routes, demilitarized zones, and prisoner exchanges. The atmosphere, while tense, remained professional until they reached the matter of intelligence operations. The Confederation must provide complete details of all infiltration methodologies, Torvzanil insisted. We cannot verify the withdrawal of operatives without understanding how they bypassed our security. That would be like asking us to disarm entirely while you maintain your fleets, Voss countered. We'll provide verification protocols, but our methodologies remain classified. Imperial Spymaster Drazevenik leaned forward, her ceremonial armor clicking softly. Then, perhaps you would explain this. She activated a holographic display showing a human female in a laboratory, working on what appeared to be synthetic Kralaxian scales. This operative was captured attempting to infiltrate our homeworld last cycle. Before terminating herself, our interrogators learned something disturbing. The display shifted to show complex molecular diagrams. These are retroviral markers, found in her bloodstream. They suggest capability for genetic modification far beyond what we believed humans possessed. Voss's expression remained neutral, but a slight tension in his posture suggested the Kralaxians had touched on something significant. Your ghost protocol isn't merely about disguises, is it, Ambassador? The Spymaster continued. Your operatives undergo genetic modification to mimic our biochemistry, to register as Kralaxian on our scanners. For the first time in their meetings, Voss hesitated before responding. Our infiltration methods are varied, but this explains the inconsistencies, the Spymaster pressed. How your agents maintain their cover for months, even years. They're not simply wearing our appearance, they're partially becoming us. A ripple of disturbed clicking spread through the Kralaxian delegation. The notion was profoundly unsettling to a species that defined itself by genetic purity. The technical details are irrelevant, Voss finally said. What matters is our willingness to withdraw these operatives as part of a binding peace agreement. Is it irrelevant? Emperor Vraxtur asked, speaking for the first time that day. This technology suggests capabilities that threaten not just our security, but our very identity as a species. What prevents you from deploying a retrovirus that could alter our entire population? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Voss sat very still, his eyes locked with the Emperor's compound gaze. Nothing prevents it, he eventually answered, his voice barely above a whisper. Nothing except human restraint. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Not a threat, but perhaps something more terrifying, the implication that humanity had already considered this option and chosen not to exercise it. We could have introduced genetic bioweapons to your worlds years ago, Voss continued, his voice gaining strength. Retroviruses that would spread silently through your population, altering Kralaxian DNA in subtle ways, generation by generation. We didn't, because despite what your propaganda tells your people, we are not monsters. He stood, pacing the chamber slowly. But make no mistake, we are survivors. Push us far enough, and there is no tactic we would not consider. The Kralaxian delegation watched him with a new understanding. The human before them represented something their empire had never truly faced in 5,000 years of conquest, a species with both the technological capability and the psychological willingness to wage war in dimensions the Kralaxians could barely comprehend. We will require time to consult with our experts, Torv Senil finally said, his voice subdued. Voss nodded. Take what time you need. But remember, our operatives remain in place until agreements are signed. The final meeting took place on Earth itself, an unprecedented concession by the Confederation that had initially alarmed Kralaxian security advisors. Emperor Vraxtur had overruled their objections, understanding the symbolic importance of concluding negotiations on humanity's homeworld. The location chosen was not some sterile conference room or imposing government chamber, but rather the open-air amphitheater at the ancient site of Delphi in Greece. Marble columns stood as silent witnesses to thousands of years of human history, a pointed reminder that while the Kralaxian Empire was indeed ancient, humanity's civilizations had their own deep roots. Ambassador Voss awaited the imperial delegation. Beneath the warm Mediterranean sun, dressed not in formal diplomatic attire, but in a simple white shirt and dark pants. The casual approach was deliberately disarming, another psychological tactic that kept the Kralaxians perpetually off balance. Emperor Vraxtur arrived with minimal escort, a significant departure from imperial protocol that did not go unnoticed. The massive ruler settled his bulk onto a specially reinforced chair, facing Voss across a simple stone table. "Your world is beautiful," the Emperor observed, compound eyes taking in the azure sky and distant sea. "I had not expected such serenity." "We fight fiercely to protect beautiful things," Voss replied. "Perhaps that's something our species share." For several moments they sat in contemplative silence. When the Emperor finally spoke, his translator conveyed unusual emotion in his normally formal speech. "I have ruled for 117 cycles," he said. "In that time, I have ordered the conquest of 3 star systems, crushed 7 rebellions, and negotiated countless treaties. Yet none have disturbed my sleep as this conflict with humanity has." Voss nodded, but remained silent, allowing the Emperor to continue. "My intelligence services have spent the past cycles analyzing what they call the human equation. They believe they have identified why a single human diplomat has succeeded in terrifying the greatest empire the galaxy has known." "And what have they concluded?" Voss asked. "That humans are not merely violent. All species capable of reaching the stars have violence in their heritage. You are not merely clever. The Mox Thalian Collective was cleverer, and we absorbed them 2,000 cycles ago. The Emperor leaned forward. What makes humans uniquely dangerous is your capacity to internalize the perspective of your enemies, to think as we think, but then to transcend those limitations. Voss smiled slightly. Empathy as a weapon. Precisely. Our species evolved as apex predators. We understand strength, territory, dominance, but humans, the Emperor's scales rippled, in a pattern indicating deep discomfort. Humans evolved as persistence hunters and social cooperators. You do not merely overpower, you outlast. You do not merely conquer, you convert. And this understanding has changed your approach to the conflict, Voss asked. It has revealed that we cannot win, not in any meaningful sense. The Emperor's admission seemed physically painful. Even if we destroyed every human fleet, occupied every human world, your kind would infiltrate, subvert, and eventually transform our empire from within. The Ghost Protocol is merely the tactical expression of humanity's evolutionary strategy. From within his robes, the Emperor produced an ornate crystalline tablet, the traditional medium for Kralaxian treaty documents. He placed it on the table between them. The terms you proposed have been accepted, with minor modifications that favor your confederation further than your original demands. Before Voss could respond, the Emperor continued, not as concession to strength, but in recognition of what we have learned about humanity. Better to have humans as trading partners than as insurgents within our borders. Voss reviewed the document carefully, surprise evident in his features. These terms are remarkably favorable. They are necessary, the Emperor replied simply. My analysts project that war with humanity would result in the collapse of our imperial structure within 10 cycles, regardless of initial military victories. The modifications ensure sufficient benefits to maintain human interest in peace. With ceremonial precision, both leaders pressed their palms to the crystal tablet, encoding their biometric signatures into the document. 5,000 years of Kralaxian expansion had finally found its limit, not in superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but in the unsettling intelligence behind a single human's eyes. As the ceremony concluded, the Emperor fixed Voss with a penetrating stare. There is one question that remains. The operatives you claimed were embedded throughout our territory. How many actually exist? Voss smiled enigmatically. Enough. The truth, Ambassador. We have peace now. The truth. Voss considered for a moment. Fewer than you feared, more than you'll ever find. He gestured to the ancient ruins surrounding them. Humanity has always understood that perception shapes reality. Sometimes the idea of a threat is more powerful than the threat itself. Understanding dawned in the Emperor's compound eyes. The Ghost Protocol was partially a bluff. Perhaps, Voss acknowledged, or perhaps not. That uncertainty is precisely the point, and the reason why this peace will endure long after both of us have returned to dust. As the Kralaxian delegation departed, Voss remained in the ancient amphitheater, watching the sunset paint the marble columns gold. The most powerful empire in known space had been brought to the negotiating table not through overwhelming force, but through the unique psychology of a species that had spent its evolutionary history outthinking both its prey and its predators. In the game of galactic politics, humanity had revealed its most terrifying weapon, not the capacity for violence, but the ability to make even the mightiest adversary question what was real and what was merely the shadow of possibility cast by a single human sitting calmly across the negotiating table.